In the heart of London, a tragedy unfolded that shook the nation and the world. On June 14, 2017, a fire erupted in Grenfell Tower, a 24-story residential building. The blaze, which began in the early hours of the morning, spread rapidly, engulfing the entire structure within minutes. The inferno raged for over 24 hours, leaving a trail of devastation and despair in its wake. 72 innocent lives were lost that night, making it the deadliest residential fire in the United Kingdom since World War II. Hundreds more were left homeless, their lives irrevocably altered by the tragedy. The Grenfell Tower fire became a chilling symbol of systemic failures, neglect, and the devastating consequences of ignoring the voices of the vulnerable. The disaster sparked outrage and grief, leading to a public inquiry to investigate the circumstances that led to the tragedy. The Grenfell Tower fire was not merely an accident, it was a preventable disaster that exposed deep-seated flaws in building regulations, fire safety standards, and the social housing system. The Grenfell Tower fire originated in a fourth-floor apartment, sparked by a faulty refrigerator freezer. The fire quickly spread from the kitchen to the exterior of the building, fueled by the flammable cladding material that encased the structure. The cladding, installed during a recent refurbishment, acted as a conduit, allowing the flames to race up the exterior of the tower at an alarming rate. Within minutes, the fire had spread to multiple floors, trapping residents in their apartments. The building's only escape route was a single narrow stairwell, which quickly became choked with smoke and fleeing residents. Many residents were unable to escape and perished in their homes. The rapid spread of the fire highlighted the inadequacy of the building's fire safety measures. Grenfell Tower had no sprinkler system, no central fire alarm, and inadequate fire doors. These deficiencies, coupled with the flammable cladding, created a perfect storm for disaster. The flammable cladding played a pivotal role in the rapid spread of the Grenfell Tower fire. The cladding system, consisting of aluminum composite panels with a polyethylene core, was highly combustible. When exposed to flames, the polyethylene core ignited, releasing toxic fumes and intense heat. The cladding system was not compliant with building regulations, which prohibited the use of combustible materials on the exterior of high-rise residential buildings. The use of this material was a fatal cost-cutting measure that ultimately cost lives. The Grenfell Tower fire exposed a widespread problem with flammable cladding in the UK. Following the disaster, thousands of buildings across the country were found to have similar cladding systems. This discovery prompted a nationwide cladding crisis, with building owners and residents facing enormous costs and uncertainty over the safety of their homes. Section 4. Unveiling Systemic Failures, the Grenfell Inquiry. In the aftermath of the tragedy, a public inquiry was launched to investigate the causes of the fire and to prevent similar disasters from happening again. The Grenfell Tower Inquiry, chaired by Sir Martin Moore-Bick, has been one of the most complex and wide-ranging public inquiries in UK history. The inquiry heard evidence from hundreds of witnesses, including survivors, firefighters, building owners, contractors, and government officials. The inquiry's findings painted a damning picture of systemic failures at every level, from the building's design and construction to the regulatory framework that allowed such a disaster to occur. The inquiry found that the building's refurbishment, completed in 2016, had significantly compromised its fire safety. The installation of the flammable cladding, along with other design changes, had created a fire trap. The inquiry also found that the building regulations were inadequate and had failed to prevent the use of dangerous materials. Section 5. A Legacy of Betrayal, Government and Industry Accountability. The Grenfell Tower fire exposed a culture of complacency and a disregard for safety within the construction industry and government. The inquiry found that building owners, contractors, and manufacturers had prioritized cost-cutting over safety, putting profits before people. The government was also found to be culpable, having failed to adequately regulate the construction industry and to ensure the safety of high-rise residential buildings. The inquiry found that the government had been aware of the risks posed by flammable cladding for years, but had failed to take decisive action. The Grenfell Tower fire was a tragedy that could and should have been prevented. It exposed a systemic failure of accountability, with those responsible for the disaster escaping justice for far too long. The inquiry's findings led to calls for criminal prosecutions and for a complete overhaul of the building regulations system. Section 6. Scars on the Soul, the enduring impact of Grenfell. The Grenfell Tower fire had a profound and lasting impact on the survivors, the bereaved families, and the wider community. The physical and emotional scars of that night will continue to haunt those who lived through it for years to come. The disaster exposed deep-seated inequalities in British society, highlighting the plight of social housing tenants who had long been ignored and marginalized. The Grenfell Tower fire was not just a building fire. It was a social and political tragedy that shone a light on the failures of the state to protect its most vulnerable citizens. In the aftermath of the disaster, the community came together to support one another, demanding justice for the victims and changes to prevent such a tragedy from ever happening again. The Grenfell Tower fire will forever be etched in the nation's memory, a stark reminder of the human cost of complacency, neglect, and the failure to learn from past mistakes.